The AllStar app, the #1 app in the business. UFC, Bellator, One Championship, PFL, and more. Get the app right now. Link in description. 5-1, man, on your current streak. 3 straight victories. Now you get a top 15 fighter. You get to crack a top 15 fighter. Are we watching a prime Julian Erosa right now?
Yeah, I think I think I've always been I wouldn't say that I wasn't in my prime when I've lost fights in the UFC. It was just, a lack of game planning and a lack of really putting the pieces together. And I think early on in the UFC as well, like I feel like sometimes you feel like you have to prove something out there. And so like I got to a point where I decided like, you know what, I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I'm just gonna go out there and fight because I used to do it on the regional scene all the time, and I was so confident in some of the shows that I fought at the lower level that I was fighting like intelligently and I was doing my job and I was getting, big wins over really tough guys in a creative fashions. I had a lot of submissions, a lot of knockouts, and so I thought it was going to translate into the UFC, but I feel like there was a little bit more of added anxiety and pressure to try to impress the UFC. Like once you get there, you want to stay there, and so like you feel like you might have to do a little bit more than just go out there and win. So I think that was my issue early on, and I feel like I've kind of had a mindset switch and just go out there and just fight. Just fight how I fight, and don't worry about impressing anybody. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, just focus on winning the fight.
I think some people they get lost in like win streaks of
Yeah.
fighters and say, "Oh, they're on a win streak, so they must be in their prime." But really, you just talked about it. You can lose on a you can lose during your prime. You could get caught.
Yeah.
This is fighting. What I mean, this is
Yeah.
fighting. You get caught. Example of the Choi fight. You got caught. What I mean,
Yeah.
that's what happened, right? And getting
Exactly.
over that. The mind switch. Like, did that allow you to kind of reset faster after that fight?
Yeah, even like I knew exactly what the issues were right after the fight. I was in the back, and I already, there was already things that were going on that I knew I needed to switch for, and I was on a 2 fight win streak, and the 2 fight win streak that I had, when you're winning fights, it's easy to be like just move on to the next and not think about things you might have done wrong or things that might have been an issue, but you look past those things because you won. You're like, oh, well, I won my fight, so it must have been good. But even when you win fights, doesn't mean the camp was great. Doesn't mean you did everything you were supposed to be doing. And so after the Choi fight, it really put in perspective a few things that I wanted to do specifically in camp and focus on. And one of the big things was just sparring um, in a more intimate setting where it was me, an opponent, 3 rounds with my coaches, and they were just there specifically dissecting exactly what I was doing right and exactly what I was doing wrong and what we needed to work on. And before that, it was like I was sparring, just random guys at Extreme Couture, and it was just like 6 random guys for 6 rounds, and it's like that's good and all if you're really just trying to find just have fun and find different looks, just like in between camps. But if you're specifically getting ready for somebody, you can't. There's no reason for me to spar a guy under 5'8" if I'm fighting Choi, or a grappler if I'm fighting Choi. Choi's a striker. I should have had countless rounds with just strikers who were tall and lanky like myself, and so um, that was my biggest issue with that fight. And I knew exactly what the issue was when we were walking in the back. Once I got my wits about me after the fight, and I was just thinking, there was a few things that I needed to adjust in the camp, and I've adjusted them for my last few fights. It doesn't mean I perfected anything. It just means that I feel more comfortable leading up to the fights when I've had my coaches. We basically mimic a fight 6 or 7 times now before I go out there and fight. So when I go out there, I've had like 6 or 7 of the exact same thing happen already with my coaches in my corner, and we've dissected a fight and basically just fought guys we've had in the gym for myself. And for that Choi fight, the very first time I had both my coaches there at the same time was that night. So it was a little bit it was a little unusual not having those guys both in my corner for a mimics fight 6 times before my fight. And so that's one big adjustment that I've made, is just kind of really taking control of my own camps And I'm such an easygoing guy that I've always been like, nah, it's fine. I'll just do this. I'll just do that. I'll just do this. But once you get to this level, you got to be a bit selfish and really figure out and take control of your camps and figure out the best ways for you to be prepared for whoever you are fighting. And so I feel really confident about the schedule that I've set for myself and just taking control of my camps.
You got Casey Halstead and Eddie Baracco in your corner.
Yeah.
What are the other pieces of your team?
Yeah, we have a lot of guys. I do a lot of my training at 10th Planet in Las Vegas, and we're obviously a very grapple heavy gym over there. And so, there's just so many killers there. It's insane. Like you can go there on any given night, and just the hobbyist, just like the dad who works a 9 to 5 and comes in at night, who's just a hobbyist of jujitsu, are fucking killers. It's crazy. Like these guys are insane. Some of those guys are better than, pro fighters that I train with on a regular basis. So, there's countless guys in that gym. There's a bunch of young studs in there. Um, but yeah, we just, and then I also get some training over at Extreme as well. I would say I probably do about 60 to 70% of my training at 10th Planet and about 30% of my training at Extreme. Eddie obviously helps me with my striking and we focus on certain things for certain fights. And then, when the fight comes around, we try to figure out a guy that's going to be ideal for my matchup. So, like last camp, Nicholas Mota, who fought right after me and got a big knockout win the weekend after I fought Daladu. Me and him were perfect for each other. I was kind of a tall, lanky grappler type of dude. I like to stand and bang, but I have decent grappling. So he was fighting a guy like that, and then I was also fighting Daladu, who was a good kickboxer, and Mota is a excellent kickboxer himself. So that worked out perfectly because we were fighting, pretty close to each other, and we were ideal looks for each other as well. So whenever the fight comes, we try to find guys that look and act and fight like the guy that we have coming up. And so like Alex Caceres, we have a kid named Adam Frank who's built just like Alex Caceres, a southpaw, really good grappler too. So like, and I think he's better than Alex in the grappling situation. So it's been good to go with him. And then we have another guy named Yaz, and Yaz is similar to that as well. He's a good southpaw, very quick, and I think that's one of Caceres's one of his best skills is he's a little smaller for the weight class. He's long and lanky, but he used to fight 35, so he doesn't have to cut a bunch of weight. And I think he's pretty quick at featherweight. So I got to get guys that are going to be fast twitch and are going to have decent grappling and just be kind of unorthodox on the feet. So those are the looks I'm looking for, and with those two guys, I'm getting that look.
Caceres, man, he has an interesting skill set, right? Like
Yeah,
he's fast, he's pretty smooth on the feet, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But then he also has decent submissions. Like he knows how to snatch up submissions in
yeah,
transitions. We've seen it in the past, and he's very experienced. His last fight against Joseph, man, he went all 15 minutes, lost a decision. What did you
yeah.
take away from that fight?
Yeah, yeah. I think Yusuf did a really good job with the leg kicks, and I think that's pretty much what separated them in that fight. Um, I've watched a lot of Caceres' most recent fights, probably his last 5 fights. And it's crazy because he's so experienced, but there's times where he'll fight guys that like he should seemingly should do really well against, and the fight is really close. And then there's other guys who I think should do well against Caceres, and then he makes it a really close fight. So it's just a weird situation because sometimes he underperforms and sometimes he overperforms. So uh, and he does look good against some of those like middle of the road guys, but I mean some of the guys on his 5 fight win streak were Chase Hooper, Austin Springer, who I fought as well, and then like Kevin Kroom, and all three of those guys uh, Chase Hooper's still in the UFC, but I think he might be getting cut. But I think most of those, those are three guys that are probably not in the. Well, Kevin Kroom and Springer aren't in the UFC anymore, and Hooper, I don't think is going to be in the UFC after that as well. So, they're impressive. They're decent wins over guys, but I think the Hooper fight and the Kevin Kroom, they were able to go 15 minutes, and they didn't look that bad themselves. against Caceres. I think those were guys that Caceres should have had a big advantage over, and didn't necessarily capitalize on that. So, but then he fought Sadiq, and he looked actually really good against Sadiq too, even though he lost that fight. So I think he can be inconsistent at times, and I'm just trying to exploit a little bit of that in his game. I think sometimes he underperforms when it's a guy he might be a little bit afraid of. If like those other guys he's done well against, were guys I think he should have done well against anyways. So I'm hoping that I can just go in there and get in his face and put the pressure on him, and eventually end up breaking him.
Does every fighter have a different danger level for you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, everybody presents different things. Even though I've watched a lot of Caceres' fights and he doesn't necessarily have like crazy knockout power, I can't be looking past that. He can still clip me on my chin and knock me out. I mean, it happens all the time. And so, like, even though I'm not super worried about his power, I still have to be aware of that. And I'm not super worried about his grappling either, but I still have to be aware of that because I train with some of the best grapplers in Las Vegas. 10th Planet, guys like Andy Varela, who's like one of the best grapplers. He's a 55er, but he's super good. And and I know that like a guy like Caceres is nowhere near him in the grappling skill set. And so I'm not necessarily worried about him subbing me out, but it's something in the back of my mind that I have to be aware of. I mean, like you said, he's a veteran of the game and he's been around for a long, long time, and he has submission wins over good guys. So and he gets it in the transitional period. So too. So it's like yeah, I can maybe out grapple a lot of these good guys, or and hold my own grappling if it's just grappling, but in an MMA fight, you get clipped once, you get dazed, and they can jump your back and choke you out, and next thing you know, you're tapping, or you're getting woke up by the ref. So I got to be aware of all these things, even though I'm not super worried about it. I think with Caceres, the thing I got to worry about most is just his overall game and experience. He has that old savvy vet, type of fight mentality. He doesn't break. He's willing to fight for 15 minutes against the toughest guys. So I got to go out there and be prepared for all of that, but be willing to go 15 minutes with him.
Back-to-back opponents miss weight, man, and you're a massive, massive featherweight. Does it
Yeah.
kind of, does it kind of confuse you a little bit how like you're so much bigger than your opponents, but they're the ones missing weight?
Yeah, fuck, man. Making weight is the hardest thing for me. I mean, fighting is the fun part for me. Like, making weight, but I actually enjoy it. It's a weird thing. Like, I really just enjoy testing myself and pushing myself and cutting weight and making the weight. I have to push myself all camp. I have to be like running like outrageously. I have to be training like 3 days, and also burning the candle at both ends, and making sure my diet's on point, and and I have to do everything right just to make weight. And these guys are missing weight that Peterson had fought 35 at one point, and then he misses weight, and it was like, okay, he missed weight the time before against Chase Hooper, so that wasn't a huge surprise. But when Dawodu missed weight, it was a big surprise because he's never missed weight as a professional or in the UFC as well. So, and he's not the biggest guy. I mean, he's muscular for sure, but he's like 5'8", and he almost looks like a guy that could be a tweener. Like he could probably make 140 pounds, but 35 might be just too hard for him to make, so he has to fight at featherweight. But yeah, honestly, like you get mad in the beginnings, but when the UFC gives you a chunk of their money, it makes it all worth it. It's only a couple of pounds, and it's really not going to be an advantage. Guarantee you, I'm going to be bigger than you the next day anyway. So I had to cut a little harder than these guys did, but I'm used to it, man. I've been cutting weight for a long time, and like you said, I'm a big guy, and it definitely takes its toll on me when I make the weight. But if I do everything right, I can make the weight, and I can comfortably rehydrate and bounce back and be able to perform at my fullest potential.
Do you feel like you got it down to a science? I know it's hard for you, but it's probably you found out every little increment that you need to, all the boxes that you need to check, so you're there, and then you're able to rehydrate and perform at your best.
Yeah. You got to have everybody has their little their rituals that they do, and things that they like to do to make sure they make the weight. And for me, running's a big thing. I enjoy running, but running also helps lean me out leading up to a fight. I'm just I'm getting older too. I'm 33 years old. I'm 6'1". My frame loves to carry heavier weight. Like my body just naturally wants to be at like 170 to 175 pounds and even bigger. Like I've got as big as 85. So like, it's already work for me to get my body down to hovering 20 pounds over where I'm 66. If I'm 2 weeks out, if I can be at 66 that morning, 2 weeks out from my fight, I'm happy, which is crazy for some people. Some people are like, 20 pounds, and then they look at me and I'm thin. I'm a lean guy already. So they're like, where the hell do you get 20 pounds? But it's like, it's the analogy of a wet sponge. I just wring myself out and take away all the water, and then I just only dehydrate myself for a few hours, hop on the scale, and rehydrate myself back. And but yeah, it's just like you got to check all the boxes and make sure you're doing everything right. But I'm a professional, man. I fucking sign a goddamn contract, and it's the word that I'm a man of my word, and I'm willing to kill myself to make the weight sometimes. So um, it's just and also one thing too, it's like I've done it under the worst circumstances. I traveled over to Cage Warriors in London and didn't even know how to cut weight very well. My weight was super fucked up. I cut so much freaking weight. Um, didn't do anything right. Did it horribly and made the weight still and fought 5 rounds with Paddy Pimblett, and arguably won that fight. And so when you have those things in the back of your head, of being able to make it with doing everything wrong, and then you do at least 90% of it right at least, then I at least have the mental fortitude to understand that it doesn't matter. I'm going to make the weight. It's going to happen. So like there's some guys who will like drop down a weight class and or just make a weight for the first time, and I think that can be a bit more tough to do if you haven't done it before. Because I've done it. I'm obviously a big guy, but I've done it so many times that I have the advantage of knowing that I can do it even under the worst circumstances. So regardless of how it's going to get done, it'll get done. And if I don't make weight, it's going to be because they're taking me to the hospital because I couldn't fucking make it to the scale. I'm going to do everything in my power to make weight. Um, and if I don't make weight, it's because they're taking me to the hospital, and I'm probably not going to be fighting because of it as well.
You just did a David Goggins speech on making weight. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
that
well, that's the mentality. I mean, like making weight and cutting weight breaks the strongest guys. Mentally, it's the hardest thing to do. Fighting's fun. Training is fun. That's why we got into the sport. We used to pay gym memberships and pay people to get our ass beat, and now we get money to do it. And so, you know, we're living the dream. But the hardest part about doing that is these weight cuts that these guys that us MMA fighters have to do because everybody wants to have a little bit of an edge. And I mean, I could fight at 55 and it'd be a lot easier to make weight, but I don't want to run into a guy like Khabib. I don't want to run into a Tony Ferguson. Those guys are like massive, in their size and their strength. There's guys I would do well against at 55, but just sizably, I'm a bit smaller than some of those guys. And when you're talking about some of these 55ers, they reach up to 200 pounds. In between camps sometimes. So um, you got to play the game, and everybody's cutting weight, so you got to do that as well. And if you're not, you're gonna get unnecessary losses.
I could see a situation where Paddy Pimblett's opponent drops out and you got to step up at 155. You
Well,
know you would want. You know you that'd be
I
lovely, right?
well, the thing about it is, I was at my barber right before I fought Dawodu, and he was asking me about that. He's like, "Oh, so what do you think about Paddy?" And I was all like, "Would you ever like want to fight him again?" And I was like, actually, after the Dawodu fight, if I beat Dawodu, what I was gonna do was I was gonna call out Paddy Pimblett because Paddy told me he would be willing to fight me only if I went up to his weight class. Even though way before time, like when he first fought in the UFC, they were doing an interview with him and he said he was gonna do what Conor McGregor did and run through the 55s and the 45s and be a double champ and all this. And so when he had said that, I was like, well, fuck, if he's willing to make 45, let's do it. Like, that's awesome. Like, let's have a rematch once and for all, see who wins the fight. And then he ended up saying later on that he wasn't going to fight featherweight, that he gets too big, that 55 is the only weight class he's willing to fight at, and that if I wanted to fight him, I would have to do it at 55, and that since I'm a pretty big guy, I can make 55, and we can have a decent fight there. So I wanted to call him out, but we ran out of time, and I was standing in the cage, and I was like, "Yo, where's Joe Rogan?" Like, because I've been wanting to talk to Joe Rogan for a long time. I'm a big fan of his, and the commission guys were like, "Oh no, you ran out of time. We're just gonna move on to the main card now." I'm like, "Are you fucking joking me?" I'm the main prelim, and we ran out of time. I'm the only guy that doesn't get to, the only winner that doesn't get to have the interview after the fight. This is insane to me. And so that kind of sucked. But you know what? Like, everything works out in its own way, and preferably I'd rather just fight at featherweight for now. But I wouldn't mind dabbling in a fight with Paddy at 55, honestly. But I don't know if he would want to do that, and I don't know if if my trajectory in the featherweight, if I was kind of like hit or miss in my fights, and I was losing fights and winning fights, and wasn't necessarily like looking to reach the top 15 and maybe top 10 and stuff like that, maybe it would be a bit more advantageous for me to call out Paddy for just for the star power that it brings to the fight.
Well, you see a lot of guys jumping up in weight that are
Yeah,
ranked, and they go back to their weight class. It doesn't do
yeah,
nothing to their stock, right? So you could do it,
exactly.
man. It
Yeah,
doesn't really matter. The UFC, they want big fights. They don't care
yeah,
about rankings. I don't think they do really, unless it means anything about the title. But with this
yeah,
fight, man, against Caceres, man, it's a big fight, big opportunity
yeah.
for you to crack that top 15. What do you see? How do you see yourself performing?
Yeah, I want to like I said earlier, I just I've always been one of those guys that has really good cardio, and I know Caceres has good cardio too, but I want to just impose my size on him and my ability to keep going and just elongate the fight into the later rounds. And the longer the fight goes, the better it is for me. And I always try to see a TKO or a submission finish in the third round. Once I really kind of just drag somebody a little bit into that deep water, they're more willing to make bigger mistakes. And so I see myself kind of just pressuring Caceres and then eventually getting him to the ground and subbing him out or TKOing him.
Two more things before I let you go. The first thing is the UFC banning gambling for fighters and
Mhm.
coaches. I'm pretty sure I remember you talking about you gamble from time to time. Now,
Yeah.
is it kind of harder for you because of this?
Well, already like I already gambled too much before. Like, and my biggest vice is I like to gamble. I like to play poker. So like gambling on fights is like it was never like a huge thing for me. I would do it just for fun. Like it's always fun to like put a little stake in the game. Like if you're like even like football or if you're watching fights to have like a parlay going or something that you're following. But honestly, it's not the biggest thing for me. But I think it's like I mean, I I don't understand like why it should be an issue if you want to gamble. Like if you're not fighting, like if I'm just watching a UFC card, why can't I just gamble on some UFC fights? Like I don't think that's like a big like it should be a big deal. But I think if coaches or have guys that are on a card, they obviously, I mean, I think there's a little conflict of interest of maybe gambling in that sense for the coaches, and if you're gambling on yourself, maybe a little bit as well. Obviously, it's illegal to gamble on, because you could lose. You could gamble against yourself and just lose on purpose, and there's obviously a bit of bias in there, but yeah, I mean, I think there's some shady stuff that maybe has been going on that they're trying to like, weed out. But it's never been a big issue for me of gambling on fights. So it doesn't bother me. I make enough money fighting, and that's the gamble. The gamble is being in the UFC. That's already I've already taken a big gamble in my life. I I don't have another career option as of right now. So fighting is the gamble already, and that gamble's already paying off a little bit right now. So um, there's no reason to stake any more money on myself than I've already done.
Yeah, there's that whole James Krause situation going on right now. I
Yeah.
think maybe there was something sparked off that. We don't know for sure, right? We
No.
just hear things here and there.
Yeah, yeah. I think they were saying something about the money line jumping like pretty unusually like quick. And so there, everybody's always going to be, there's always going to be people that think there's a conspiracy going on of something. And I know James has, his own like, gambling site or something. So that can get a little dicey. But unless there's any like concrete evidence, unless there's like text messages or something, or some sort of like solid evidence showing that there was some sort of, gambling situation with that fight specifically, it's going to be really hard to even nail anything down. I think just the line changing doesn't really do that unless it comes out that that fighter specifically or James Krause specifically and people around them put a huge amount of money and they're trying to cash out later. Like that would be either that or like there would have to be some concrete evidence of like text messages or something.
December 17th, UFC Fight Night in Las Vegas. Julian, thank you so much for the time. Go into the descriptions and download the AllStar app. We'll speak soon again, man. You're on an incredible streak, and it's fun just to interview you ahead of every single fight, man. It's
Yeah,
it's
man.
interesting to see like the changes in you and your demeanor and like the changes that you made, and you always peel off a little layer every single time. It's great.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that.